Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked. The choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences, slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The wizarding world rests on a quiet article of faith that the Sorting Hat always knows. It has, for 1,000 years, spoken with methodical certainty. In this timeline, on a September evening in 1991, that certainty dies. The Great Hall is not roaring with applause when Harry Potter walks forward. It is holding its breath. Candles hover like a suspended verdict. Banners hang heavy with inherited authority, and 4 house tables lean collectively toward the small boy, who, by all rights, should simply confirm the legend. The hat is lowered. The brim folds over his eyes. Silence hardens into something else. Waiting, calculation, fear. In canon memory, the hat mutters, hesitates, then obeys the boy's whispered plea. Here, it does not merely hesitate. It stalls. It digs in. Seconds become a full minute, then 2, then 5, outstripping every recorded hat style in Hogwarts history. McGonagall's knuckles whiten around her roll of parchment. Snape's gaze narrows, not in disdain, but in dawning, tactical concern. Dumbledore's fingers, usually steepled in theatrical calm, flatten on the high table as the familiar ritual begins to fracture under the weight of one child. Harry hears no gentle debate between Gryffindor and Slytherin. He hears an argument that sounds like war, a chorus of ancient minds, the Founder's residual soul resonance, cycling through values and futures and probabilities, only to crash, again and again, against the same impasse. He fits all of them too well, and none of them safely. The hat was designed as a sorting mechanism, not as a judge of existential threats. It was built to allocate potential, not to quarantine it. Then, for the first time since the Founders turned their own thinking into enchanted cloth, the hat does something unprecedented. It refuses. No house, it declares. Voice amplified through the hall like a spell gone wrong. No placement. No decision. Harry James Potter is deemed undecidable. A null result in a system that has never admitted failure. The world believes Harry is dangerous because he survived Voldemort. They are wrong. In this moment, his true danger is revealed. He has broken the most enduring enchantment the Founders ever wove, the quiet algorithm beneath every friendship, rivalry, and alliance Hogwarts has ever produced. From this crack, the entire structure begins to shift. Houses cease to be cozy identities and re-emerge as political factions, each insisting that Harry is naturally theirs. Gryffindor claims his defiance, Slytherin his ambition, Ravenclaw his insight, Hufflepuff his stubborn loyalty. Common rooms become campaign headquarters. The house tables, once a fortress of adolescent routine, turn into negotiating fronts in a low-grade internal war. Dumbledore's long game, built on a Gryffindor hero shaped by predictable loyalties, derails in an instant. He cannot mentor what he does not own. Voldemort, watching from the dark through proxies and reports, revises his strategy around a boy who marches under no banner, a weapon being polished in the dark by competing ideologies rather than a single house ethos. If the hat cannot claim Harry, who can? Gryffindor's courage, Slytherin's ambition, Ravenclaw's intellect, Hufflepuff's loyalty. Each reaches for him, but what if something older and darker is already closing its hand? In the next section, we trace how one undecided boy forces Hogwarts to reveal what it truly is. Not a school, but a battleground over the soul of its most volatile masterpiece. How the Hat thinks. 1,000 years of certainty meets a paradox. Hogwarts was not built on stone alone. It was built on an argument that refused to die. The Sorting Hat is that argument given voice. 1,000 years of disagreement compressed into fraying brim and stitched mouth, delivering judgment with methodical certainty to 11-year-olds who think they are merely being seated for dinner. In canon, the hat is presented as whimsical, almost theatrical, yet its origin is brutally precise. Godric, Salazar, Rowena, and Helga poured fragments of their minds, their values, and their ambitions into a single relic, then bound it to a task that outlived their own war. It does not simply read thoughts, it weighs values, excavates fears, measures potential trajectories like branching timelines, and then chooses the placement that preserves equilibrium between four houses and the ideological ecosystem of the school. The feast is a ritual. The hat is a regulator. Across centuries, that regulator has wavered, but it has not broken. Hat stalls, those rare, whispered anomalies, are the acknowledged edge of its uncertainty. Minerva McGonagall, held for minutes between Ravenclaw's cool logic and Gryffindor's sharp courage. Peter Pettigrew, uncomfortably straddling Hufflepuff's loyalty and Slytherin's furtive self-preservation. Even in the Slytherin timeline of canon possibility, Harry himself nearly joins their ranks, a breath away from being recorded as a Hatstall before his whispered, "Not Slytherin," tips the scales. The system strains. Then it holds. They are wrong to assume that means the hat is neutral. It is not a celestial referee floating above house politics. It is chained to the founder's competing priorities, acting as arbiter and pressure valve for an argument about what a witch or wizard should be in a world permanently on the brink of war. Every difficult child is a test case. Every borderline decision is a minor skirmish in an ancient debate. Its authority is borrowed, not absolute. In this timeline, that borrowed authority finally meets a paradox. When the hat settles on Harry's head, it does not find the familiar duality, Gryffindor's daring against Slytherin's ambition. It finds a perfect, destabilizing soul resonance with all four houses at once. Gryffindor courage that will walk into death without flinching. Slytherin cunning that sees people as pieces and power as geometry. Ravenclaw intellect that dissects the world with surgical, tactically lethal clarity. Hufflepuff loyalty that, once granted, is a fortress no enemy can breach. The hat is designed to resolve tensions, to force a dominant note out of a discordant chord. Here, every note is equally loud. There is no majority trait to amplify, no safe imbalance to exploit, no house that can claim Harry as a masterpiece, to be moulded without lying. The relic begins to circle internally, through possibilities it has never had to consider, discovering that any choice it makes will not restore balance. It will annihilate it. So it does something unprecedented. It fails. The silence that follows is not theatrical. It is structural. And beneath that silence, a deeper question begins to vibrate. If the founders built a mechanism that cannot classify Harry, what exactly did they fail to understand about the human soul they tried to control? That crack in the design is not theoretical. In the next section, we watch Hogwarts try to plaster over it, while Harry quietly learns how to turn that flaw into a weapon. Halloween 1981. Rewritten. The night the founders' magic shifted. That crack in the design does not appear in Harry's first year. It begins a decade earlier, in a cottage already condemned by prophecy. Halloween 1981. Godric's Hollow is not yet legend, only a quiet cul-de-sac where the war has come to roost. The canonical narration is familiar. Lily Potter stands between her child and death. Voldemort raises the Elder Wand's lesser cousin, and green light writes a full stop at the end of a generation's fear. The killing curse rebounds. The Dark Lord disintegrates, and the world decides the explanation is simple. Love, old magic, the protective charm of sacrifice. They are wrong. That story is not false, but it is incomplete, a sanitized summary of an event that shook older, deeper structures than anyone realizes. Seen clinically, the sequence is brutal in its precision. Lily's refusal creates a sacrificial ward keyed to blood and intent. Voldemort's Avada Kedavra strikes that ward, fails to find purchase, and is forced to move. Energy that should annihilate a soul instead ricochets through a mother's protection, splintering as it bends. In this timeline, that deflection does not merely scar Harry's forehead, it refracts him. The curse passes through a matrix of love, fear, and unspent futures, and what emerges is not a single clean trajectory of character, but a prism of incompatible potentials. The founders had a word for this, one that never made it into Bin's droning lectures. The founders' fracture. When a young witch or wizard's essence resonates equally with all four archetypes: courage, ambition, intellect, loyalty, the soul does not settle, it shivers. That night, the rebounding curse collides with Lily's ward and the dormant Hogwarts enchantments tied to her lineage, producing a rare phenomenon the castle's oldest stones would recognize as dangerous soul resonance, if anyone still listened to stones. Across Britain, in a fortress of shifting staircases and patient portraits, the response is immediate and almost imperceptible. The outer wards of Hogwarts flex, as if in a sudden gale, though no wind touches the towers. A tremor of power moves through the house tables, rattling empty goblets in the great hall, before fading back into silence. High in a cupboard off the headmaster's office, the sorting hat seams twitch. Ancient stitches itch with the awareness of a pattern that does not fit. An old song, half woven for the next September, stirs in its fabric, rises to the edge of articulation, then collapses. The mechanism built to categorize has just sensed a soul it cannot anchor with methodical certainty. In this timeline, Harry Potter is not merely the boy who lived. He is the boy who unbalanced. His core identity is no longer a clean alignment with Godric's valor, or Salazar's cunning with Rowena's clarity, or Helga's steadiness. but a volatile superposition of all four, a masterpiece to be molded that refuses to choose its sculptor. To the founder's design, he is both weapon and glitch, a variable that makes every house calculus unstable, tactically lethal, precisely because he cannot be filed away. Albus Dumbledore feels it. As Voldemort's body unravels in Godric's Hollow, a corresponding chill runs through the castle's magic, brushing his consciousness like a distant scream muffled by stone. He pauses, hand on a windowsill, blue eyes narrowing behind half-moons, and files the disturbance beside prophecy and Dark Lord in his private taxonomy of threats. Hogwarts has shifted. The war has turned. He assumes the two facts are identical. In that misreading lies the true danger, because the real anomaly is not the absence of Voldemort. It is a child in a ruined crib, already pulling every founder's legacy toward himself, and the Hat has just learned it will not be allowed to look away. Growing up between houses, Harry's fragmented, pre-Hogwarts identity, Privet Drive becomes the control experiment for this anomaly, a perfectly ordinary street, attempting to contain a child who is already pulling four contradictory legacies through his veins. The Dursleys still believe, with the methodical certainty of petty tyrants, that cruelty will stamp the magic out of him. They are wrong. In this timeline, Harry does not merely endure number 4, he studies it. The cupboard under the stairs is not just a prison, it is a vantage point. Thin walls, generous acoustics, and long hours of enforced stillness teach him to map the household like an enemy fortress. He learns when Dudley's feet hit the floorboards how Vernon's breathing changes before a rage which floorboard near the fridge will betray him. This is Slytherin as survival instinct, calculating routes, anticipating ambushes, vanishing before the fist descends. Yet the same boy who ghosts around corners also hoards paperbacks from the charity shop bin, reading in snatched fragments by the thin light under the door. Manuals, romance novels, gardening guides. It does not matter. Each text is a crack in the wall of Privet Drive, a faint soul resonance with a larger world that clearly exists somewhere beyond beige curtains and burned toast. This is Ravenclaw, without resources or praise, an intellect forced underground, growing sideways in the dark. The contradictions deepen. When Dudley's gang turns on a smaller child in the park, Harry steps between them with the weary, stubborn courage of someone who already knows the cost. He takes the punches, accepts the detention, absorbs Petunia's shrill fury so the target can escape. There is nothing glamorous here, no roaring lion, only Hufflepuff's quiet, immovable refusal to let someone else bleed if he can stand in the way. A weapon being polished in the dark, but one that keeps turning its edge against harm, not advantage. And sometimes the mask slips. A plate shatters near his head, a slur lands too precisely, and Gryffindor flashes up like a flare over a battlefield. He talks back. He ducks, but does not run. Once, at 8, he looks Vernon in the eye and says, with terrifying calm, that one day this will end, and it will not be Uncle Vernon who decides how. The backhand is immediate. The memory lingers like prophecy, because he never settles into one mode. Never purely sly, purely studious, purely kind, or purely defiant. Harry grows up without a stable story about himself. He does not belong to the Muggle world that fears him. but he also does not belong to any single coping strategy. Each is provisional, each discarded and reclaimed as conditions shift. Fragmented, yes, but also unnervingly adaptable. A masterpiece to be molded that no one is actually shaping. This instability calcifies into a deeper terror. Pain he can catalogue. Hunger he can plan around. What he cannot strategize away is the possibility that there is nowhere he fits, that even the whispered wizard world Petunia refuses to name might look at him and decide he is wrong. Too mixed, too much. Rejection, not death, becomes the true nightmare. So by the time Hagrid knocks down the door, Harry has already learned to survive by changing masks faster than anyone can pin him down. The Slytherin timeline begins not with Dark Lords, but with a child who has trained himself to be many people at once. When the Sorting Hat later descends, expecting to sort traits into clean heraldic colours, it will meet something unprecedented, a soul that has made multiplicity its only shield. And, for the first time in 1,000 years, the Hat will discover that choosing one house is not merely difficult. It may be impossible. The ceremony that wouldn't end when the hat starts to break. The Great Hall has always been sold to us as comforting spectacle. Floating candles, 4 rivers of candle wax light, banners in primary colours, a fortress of tradition humming under an enchanted ceiling. They are wrong. In this timeline, the hall becomes a laboratory, and the sorting ceremony is the experiment that finally breaks its apparatus. Candles hover in mathematically even rows, each flame steady as if the air itself has been disciplined. The ceiling reflects an alpine black sky pricked with cold stars, while house banners hang with the methodical certainty of heraldic propaganda. Lion, serpent, eagle, badger, each a thesis about what power should look like. The Sorting Hat's song runs through its usual history of founders and values, but tonight there is an extra verse, an unease threaded into rhyme, a warning that change is coming, that some future soul resonance may not fit the old equations. No one understands it. Yet, the first names are called, and normalcy performs itself with mechanical efficiency. A small Gryffindor bursts into tears of joy. A Ravenclaw walks away, already calculating their study schedule. A Hufflepuff is cheered with noisy relief by students who need loyalty to be simple. Slytherin takes a sharp-eyed boy whose ambition smells like polished steel. The line shortens, the rhythm settles. The world believes it remembers how this goes. Then, Potter, Harry, the whisper, moves like a pressure wave. Harry walks forward under 1,000 stares, his expression controlled, shoulders squared, with the drilled poise of a weapon being polished in the dark. The hat drops over his eyes. Silence. Then a voice, dry and ancient in his mind. Ah. Complicated. Gryffindor first, by habit. Courage, nerve, a willingness to walk into war if the calculus demands it. The hat tastes the memory of him standing between Bellatrix and a curse meant for an elf, not from reckless bravery, but from cold prioritization. Courage, yes, but instrumental, tactically lethal. You would sharpen them into soldiers, it murmurs, and unmake their innocence. Slytherin next, and here the resonance is almost painful. Ambition braided with discipline, a masterpiece to be molded, an instinct for hierarchy that could turn the dungeons into a command center. In Slytherin, you are a king, the Hat concedes, but you end the game, not merely win it. You tip the house from cunning into open authority, and the balance fails. Ravenclaw's claim is quieter, but no less real. His analytical detachment, his hunger for systems, his fascination with how power moves through institutions. Placed there, he would turn their tower into a think tank for war. Hufflepuff, finally, surprises even the Hat. His ferocious loyalty to a chosen few, his belief in earned trust. You would radicalize their patience, it thinks, turning gardeners into partisans. Seconds have become minutes. The hall's excitement curdles. McGonagall's knuckles whiten around the parchment. Snape's eyes narrow, tracking every twitch of Harry's jaw. Dumbledore's gaze has lost all twinkle. This is the Slytherin timeline, and his instrument is malfunctioning in public. 5 minutes pass, a hat stall, then beyond a hat stall. The Hat is no longer merely considering, it is afraid. You are many houses at once, it whispers, and any single choice breaks the design I was made to preserve. And then, in a voice that cracks across the hall like a misfired spell, it does something unprecedented, unclaimed. The word slams into the stone. The Hat falls silent on his head, not in completion but in refusal, leaving Harry standing alone in the center of a system that has just admitted it has no rule for him. Hat stalls interrupted. Why Harry is more than just a long sorting. For a stunned heartbeat, the hall assumes it has misheard. Unclaimed sounds like a procedural delay, a bureaucratic hiccup, not a verdict. They are wrong. The silence that follows is not the pause of a long sorting. It is the absence of a decision from an artifact that has always, with methodical certainty, chosen. Canon offers a comforting category for hesitation. The Hat Stall, Minerva McGonagall, suspended between Ravenclaw's cool intellect and Gryffindor's disciplined courage. Peter Pettigrew, vacillating between Slytherin's self-preservation and Gryffindor's borrowed bravado. In each case, the Hat argued with itself, weighed futures, and then committed. Delay, yes. Incapacity, no. A Hat style is a debate. This is a failure. The difference is structural. The Hat was not designed to be omnipotent. It was engineered by 4 founders with competing ideologies who understood that Hogwarts, if left adrift, would become a weapon for whichever house dominated it. Its enchantments are therefore shackled to 3 constraints. Maintain equilibrium between the houses, prevent any one archetype from consuming the school, and, when feasible, honor the student's articulated choice. In this timeline, Harry's mind presses against all 3, like a blade against old leather. The soul resonance inside him is not a simple blend of traits. It is a founder's fracture. Gryffindor's defiant charge, Slytherin's cold calculus, Ravenclaw's ruthless curiosity, Hufflepuff's stubborn loyalty, all present, all amplified by a Horcrux's alien echo. Any single placement becomes an act of magical gerrymandering. Put him in Slytherin, and cunning ceases to be a house quality and becomes the school's dominant frequency. Gryffindor's grow sharper, Ravenclaw's more instrumental, Hufflepuff's more quietly strategic. Place him in Hufflepuff, and suddenly Sacrifice and cohesion flood the castle, turning every corridor into a nascent fortress. One boy, misallocated, would warp the Founder's long wall for balance. The castle feels it. As the hat falls silent on his head, the banners above the house tables do not merely sway, they flicker, colours bleeding into one another before snapping back, as if the enchantments are attempting to redraw their own borders. The ambient magic in the hall stutters. Candles dip, shadows lengthen. A low pressure settles behind the eyes of every magically sensitive student. A few clutch at their temples. One Ravenclaw first year later swears she heard, for an instant, 4 voices arguing in the stones. This is not theatrics. It is a system-wide recalibration around an anomaly that cannot be safely categorized. The Slytherin timeline is often imagined as beginning with a greedy hat overriding a nervous boy. In this version, the hat refuses the responsibility altogether, acknowledging that any verdict it gives would be an act of war on the school's design, which leaves a question hanging in the charged air, heavier than any banner. If the Sorting Hat cannot exercise its ancient authority over the boy who lived, if he is neither Gryffindor nor Slytherin, nor anything the Founders prepared for, then who exactly will decide what Harry Potter becomes? Dumbledore with his long game, the Ministry with its fear, or Harry himself, a masterpiece to be moulded, a weapon being polished in the dark? The hall waits for an adult to answer. None of them are ready to, and the first move to claim the unclaimed boy is already forming behind one pair of watching eyes. 4 houses, 1 prize. The opening shots of a Hogwarts power struggle. The watching eyes belong, of course, to Gryffindor. The moment the hat's verdict of no house stops echoing, the great hall fractures. It is not quiet awe. It is impact. Gryffindor erupts first. Weasley twins on benches, Lee Jordan half standing on the table, voices crashing together around one blunt demand. Put him with us, anyway. The boy who lived, they argue, belongs where his parents fought, where war heroes sleep in the walls like latent thunder. Across the aisle, Slytherin does not shout, it smiles. Malfoy's pale face tilts, a smirk already drafting contingencies, while older snakes murmur that rules, in this timeline, have always been a negotiable architecture. If a 1,000-year-old hat can be overridden once, it can be overridden again, preferably in their favor, under their head of house, within their stone fortress, beneath the lake. Ravenclaw reacts in a different register. No cheering, no jeering, only a rising hum of speculation. Was the enchantment failing? Had some unprecedented soul resonance shorted the Founder's design? Could a human mind genuinely balance incompatible virtues without collapsing? Quills are already being imagined, essays mentally outlined, as if Harry Potter is not a boy, but a thesis question. Hufflepuff, meanwhile, looks stricken. Fairness is not an abstraction for them. It is oxygen. If the hat can simply refuse, what happens to every quiet child who trusted this ritual to see them, to place them? Their whispers circle around precedent, around frightened first years who now watch the stool like a guillotine, around the sense that the world just broke one of its few honest rules. McGonagall moves first. Her chair scrapes back with a sound like a drawn blade, and her voice, when it cuts through the noise, is iron. Harry Potter, she declares, is the son of James and Lily, lions to their last breath. Gryffindor is not merely appropriate, it is owed. In her mind, house is inheritance, and to deny him that banner is to sever him from the only family history he has left. Snape answers with cold water. The hat, he reminds the hall, saw Slytherin potential and choked on it. To ignore that is not mercy, but negligence. A child this volatile, this unmoored, placed in a house that flatters only his courage while starving his cunning, is a weapon pointed inward at Hogwarts itself. They are wrong, he implies, to treat sentiment as strategy. Flitwick's intervention is softer but surgical. A mind that can paralyze the Sorting Hat, he notes, must be honed where intellect is discipline, not spectacle. To waste that on theatrics is to squander a masterpiece to be moulded. Sprout counters with earthbound conviction. A boy this torn does not need challenge first. He needs stability, loyalty, hands that will not drop him when the war myth fades. Dumbledore lets the argument crest before he speaks. Outwardly, he is calm, almost amused, proposing a temporary solution. Harry will attend classes, sleep in an unused tower room, and remain unassigned while the hat is studied. Inwardly, the Slytherin timeline he has always feared blooms. The narrative of Harry the uncomplicated Gryffindor champion is slipping, methodical certainty dissolving into contested symbolism. Because in this moment, Harry ceases to be a student and becomes an asset. Each house sees not a nervous 11-year-old, but proof that their values define the future. Gryffindor imagines a standard bearer, Slytherin a tactically lethal operator, Ravenclaw a living anomaly, Hufflepuff an argument for decency in a darkening world. The pattern breaks when Harry finally speaks. He asks, very quietly, what happens if he chooses nothing? The Hall does not yet know that this refusal will ignite a long hidden war for his allegiance, and that the next move will not be made in public at all. The Founder's Trial, inventing a new system for a broken one. The question hangs in the vaulted air like a curse that has not yet chosen a target. For the first time in a millennium, the sorting ceremony does not end with applause, but with an escorted evacuation and a boy who belongs nowhere being led out under a shroud of institutional embarrassment. The emergency staff meeting convenes before the tables have even cleared. In the circular staff room, portraits of former headmasters lean forward, whispering about hat stalls and precedent, their painted eyes bright with predatory curiosity. The sorting hat itself sulks on a high shelf, folds drawn tight, radiating an almost audible refusal. Minerva insists that the hat must decide. Snape, with quiet venom, argues that leaving Potter unclaimed is a security risk. Sprout and Flitwick speak of fairness, of soul resonance, and child welfare. Underneath the procedural language lies one shared terror. If they admit the system can fail, the authority of Hogwarts fractures. Dumbledore listens longer than is comfortable. He lets the silence harden until even the portraits fall still. When he finally speaks, it is not with methodical certainty, but with the wary creativity of a man who knows that in this timeline, the old mechanisms are no longer sufficient. He proposes, or rather, allows the room to maneuver him into proposing, the Founder's Trial, a year-long experiment in which Harry will rotate between houses, his allegiance treated as an open question rather than a foregone conclusion. The hat will reassess him at defined intervals, searching for a stable alignment that refuses to emerge in a single chaotic sitting. The rules crystallize with bureaucratic speed. For 6-week segments, Harry will live in each common room in turn, subject to its passwords, its culture, its unspoken hierarchies. His timetable is engineered so that core classes remain shared, but he receives special mentorship sessions with each head of house, McGonagall drilling discipline and transfiguration, Snape testing his defenses like a weapon being polished in the dark, Flitwick probing his precision, Sprout measuring his capacity for loyalty under pressure. At year's end, there will be a formal review, written evaluations from staff, anonymous impressions from peers, and a final, private interview with the hat to determine whether any house has achieved true resonance. Harry hears all this, not in the staff room, but later, in Dumbledore's office, beneath the slow turning of silver instruments. To the staff, the trial is an administrative compromise. To Harry, it is a conditional sentence. He is being offered everything he ever wanted: friends, warmth, a place to sleep that is not a cupboard, yet always on a rotating basis, always prefaced with the reminder that he is temporary. He will learn the passwords to 4 fortresses and belong completely to none. He nods, because what else can he do? But the acceptance is edged with dread. Every dormitory will be another audience. Every friendship, potentially on loan. The world will watch him move like a contested asset through corridors that were built to separate, not to share. The staff believe they have contained a crisis. They are wrong. The Founder's trial does not simply patch a broken ceremony. It rewires the social circuitry of Hogwarts itself. Rival houses will be forced into proximity. Alliances will form across banners that were meant to divide, and resentments will calcify in shadows the professors never patrol. And, somewhere beyond the castle's wards, a man studying Hogwarts as a battlefield will eventually learn that its greatest variable walks freely between factions, unclaimed. In the Slytherin timeline, that is not a curiosity. It is an opportunity. Living 4 lives at once, Harry's rotating house childhood. The solution the Founder's enchantments finally spit out is inelegant, brutal, and utterly transformative. Rotation. Harry Potter will not belong to a house. He will orbit them. In this timeline, the arrangement is codified with methodical certainty. Every 4 weeks, at Sunday curfew, Harry packs his trunk under the watch of a neutral prefect and physically migrates. Red and gold 1 month, then green and silver, then blue and bronze, then yellow and black. Schedules are re-inked, passwords whispered, bed claimed, social gravity forcibly inverted. Hogwarts, that ancient fortress of routine, becomes a carousel with one unwilling axis. Gryffindor is always the loudest landing. The first night back, the common room roars as if reclaiming lost territory. Fred and George stage impromptu dueling demonstrations. Lee Jordan narrates Harry's supposed exploits with embellishments that would embarrass Lockhart, and the fire throws heroic shadows on the walls, like a prophecy they intend to drag him into. Here, bravery is not a virtue but a currency. Dares appear like homework. Sneak past Filch, challenge a bludger bareheaded, argue with Snape in class. Refusal is framed as cowardice, acceptance as destiny. Slytherin receives him in relative silence, but the quiet is denser, weaponized. The common room's green-lit gloom presses like deep water. Conversations lower when he enters, then sharpen. They do not cheer his arrival. They audit it. Within hours, subtle negotiations are underway. Who sits with him at dinner? Who offers to clarify Snape's expectations? Who hints at family libraries containing volumes Hogwarts pretends do not exist? Protection is offered not as kindness, but as contract. Secrets are the only roaring fires here. Ravenclaw's welcome is cooler still, almost clinical. Their tower is an alpine monastery of ink and star charts, and Harry's presence is treated as an intriguing anomaly in an otherwise stable equation. They court him with knowledge. Arithmancy proofs that map spellwork like music, obscure histories of the founders that make the hat's outburst look less like a glitch and more like a reactivation, whispered references to soul resonance and experimental charms that border on forbidden. Here, the seduction is not safety or glory, it is understanding. Hufflepuff, by contrast, simply makes space. No fanfare, no audition. A bed is aired, a plate kept warm, a hand placed on his shoulder when he returns from a detention no one asks him to justify. They fold him into study circles, into greenhouse shifts, into the quiet labor that keeps the castle from collapsing under the weight of adolescent war games. Their offer is the most disarming of all, unconditional belonging without leverage. The psychological cost is immediate and compounding. Harry learns, with a precocity that should alarm every adult, to code switch at the portrait hole. In Gryffindor, he laughs louder, frames caution as tactical heroism. In Slytherin, he trims his sentences, reveals just enough vulnerability to invite investment, but never enough to concede leverage. In Ravenclaw, he lets his questions show. In Hufflepuff, his exhaustion. He becomes a mirror that reflects each house's values back at them with unnerving clarity. They call it adaptability. They are wrong. Underneath, identity shears. Alone in unused classrooms between rotations, Harry catches himself rehearsing reactions, how this version of him would respond, how that one must not. The skill makes him tactically lethal in corridors and classrooms. He can read a flinch, a boast, a silence, and predict the next 3 moves. But when the castle sleeps and no banner hangs over his bed, the question of who is reading whom becomes less clear. Jealousies germinate with mathematical precision. Gryffindors resent the weeks he spends down there. Slytherins sneer at his tourist loyalties. Ravenclaws bristle when he prioritizes Quidditch over a breakthrough. Hufflepuffs quietly ache when he leaves their table mid-sentence because another house has claimed his time. Some friendships harden into possessive campaigns. Others rot into accusations of betrayal. The staff are no less strategic. McGonagall doubles down on Gryffindor weeks, assigning him responsibilities that imply an eventual, permanent claim. Flitwick slips him advanced charms during Ravenclaw rotations, as if arming a future scholar. In Hufflepuff months, Sprout speaks to him like a long-term steward of the school's living systems. And in Slytherin, Snape conducts a different experiment altogether. Pointed humiliations in public. Quiet, razor-edged questions in private. Testing whether Harry responds better to contempt, to grudging respect. or to the promise of power. Quirrell watches from the periphery of every house table, stutter conveniently worse or better, depending on who surrounds Harry that week. He is already charting which version of the boy is most exploitable, the one who craves safety, the one who craves, most dangerously, to stop rotating at all. When the next crisis comes, it will not strike a unified child. It will hit 4 incomplete lives, sharing one body. Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape. 3 adults, 3 agendas. The faculty quickly realizes a brutal truth. 4 incomplete lives sharing one body can be guided or weaponized, depending on who reaches him first. The world will later insist that Hogwarts rallied around the boy who lived as a child in need. They are wrong. In this timeline, Hogwarts becomes a quiet battlefield, and Harry's undecided status is the high ground. For Dumbledore, the crisis is architectural. His entire long-range design assumed a Gryffindor Harry anchored in a house that rewards reckless courage, surrounded by Weasleys and Muggleborns who would act as moral ballast and emotional leash. Now, the boy eats at one table and studies at another, borrowing virtues and vices from each house with disconcerting ease. Dumbledore is forced to confront a more dangerous possibility, that Harry is no longer a narrative hero to be nudged, but a masterpiece to be molded by whichever authority gains his quiet allegiance. He adjusts with methodical certainty, a private tea after each house rotation, questions wrapped in grandfatherly warmth, subtle probes into which common room feels least like a fortress and most like home. When Harry mentions Slytherin's brutal honesty about power, Dumbledore's eyes harden for a heartbeat. When Harry praises Hufflepuff's refusal to abandon the weakest, something like relief flickers. The headmaster is not just mentoring, he is running a longitudinal experiment on a living prophecy. McGonagall's struggle is more intimate, and therefore more corrosive. Officially, she is the guardian of process. The hat failed, the trial was fair. The precedent must stand, or Hogwarts' constitutional magic begins to fray. Unofficially, every time she sees James's messy hair above Slytherin green, or Lily's eyes catching Ravenclaw blue in torchlight, there is a tiny fracture in her composure. The resonance is wrong. The boy who should have been the beating heart of her house now drifts through it as a visitor. Her response is conflicted pedagogy. She pushes him hardest in Transfiguration, assigning work calibrated to the edge of his capacity, watching which house's habits surface under stress. Does he seek Gryffindor applause, Ravenclaw perfection, Hufflepuff solidarity, or Slytherin advantage? In staff meetings, she defends his rotational status with clipped precision, yet her barbs at Snape sharpen whenever Harry spends a week in the dungeons. Duty and grief duel behind her spectacles. Snape, however, experiences no such ambiguity. His hatred of James and his promise to protect Lily's son are no longer parallel lines. They intersect in Harry's undecided mind. To him, an unanchored Harry is not a pedagogical puzzle, but a volatile weapon being polished in the dark. Only Slytherin discipline, he argues, can contain that volatility, can teach the boy to sheathe his power rather than bleed it across the castle. Behind closed doors, his negotiations with Dumbledore are surgical. He cites corridor incidents where Harry's anger flared in 4 directions at once, minor hexes misaligned with any single house ethos. He proposes controlled exposure to occlumency techniques under the pretext of calming the boy's house dissonance. Dumbledore hesitates. McGonagall objects. The staff room becomes a low-voiced war over access to Harry's interior world. Each adult sets tests. Dumbledore leaves the invisibility cloak unmonitored, tracking whether Harry uses it for Gryffindor-style adventure or Slytherin-style surveillance. McGonagall engineers group projects that force him to choose which house's peers to disappoint. Snape accidentally leaves restricted texts half visible, watching whether curiosity or conscience wins. On paper, they are mentors. In practice, they are competing intelligence services. The balance shifts on a wet Tuesday in November. Harry, exhausted after a week of clashing house expectations, snaps at Malfoy in potions. The emotional spike tears a hole in his mental defenses. Snape's legilimency, usually a controlled probe, slips deeper than intended. For an instant, he does not see childhood memories. He sees 4 spectral silhouettes: lion, serpent, eagle, badger, straining against a jagged crack in the castle's foundations, a wordless scream of soul resonance and ancient betrayal. The Founder's fracture. When the moment passes, Harry only feels violated and furious. Snape, breathing hard, lies with practiced ease, dismissing the incident as clumsiness. He reports nothing of what he saw to Dumbledore. In the silence of his chambers, he begins his own private campaign, armed with a secret that could redefine the war and the boy at its center if he chooses to reveal it. He does not yet. Friendships rewired. Ron, Hermione, Draco, and the houseless boy. In the wake of Snape's private revelation, the question of who owns Harry Potter does not stay in the staff corridors. It bleeds backward, rewiring even the earliest encounters that in canon seemed almost innocent. The first fracture line appears not under the enchanted ceiling, but on the train, in a cramped compartment that becomes a political chamber without anyone meaning it to. Ron Weasley enters with a hand-me-down trunk and the weary bravado of a boy who already knows his place in the world. Poor Gryffindor, peripheral. In this timeline, the news has travelled faster than the Express itself. Whispers of the Founder's trial, of a Sorting Hat that hesitated, then refused, then demanded rotation. Ron sits opposite the boy who lived and cannot decide if he is meeting a legend or an administrative nightmare. His admiration is immediate. His insecurity is worse. If Harry belongs to all houses, does that make him too grand for a Weasley, or too strange to be safe? The conversation about chocolate frog cards and Quidditch still happens, but every pause is heavier. Ron probes for reassurance. You'd pick Gryffindor though, wouldn't you? And Harry, who has no methodical certainty about anything yet, can only offer a shrug that feels like betrayal. A friendship is born, but with a hairline crack running through its spine, a fault that will widen every time Harry walks toward the Slytherin table. Hermione Granger enters the story as an interruption, not a comfort. When she bursts into their compartment, teeth chattering with facts about the Founders and hat stalls, her eyes lock on Harry with the intensity of a researcher who has just discovered a living anomaly. The rules say the hat always decides. The books insist the system is infallible. They are wrong, and the contradiction electrifies her. She quizzes Harry, not unkindly but relentlessly, about what he thought, what he felt, whether there was a moment of soul resonance with any single house. For Hermione, Harry is simultaneously a potential friend and a masterpiece to be molded into an answer. Her respect for Hogwarts as a fortress of tradition wars, with the thrill of a data point that breaks the graph. She volunteers herself as his guide to the library, but also, quietly, as the chronicler of his rotations, which dormitory he sleeps in, how his magic behaves in each common room, whether the hat's failure reveals a deeper flaw in the founder's design. Draco Malfoy, by contrast, recognizes an opportunity with tactically lethal clarity. On the platform, he offers his hand, as in canon, but in the Slytherin timeline, that gesture is not only about blood purity, it is about access. A boy who walks between lions, eagles, badgers, and snakes is not merely a celebrity. He is a corridor, a conduit, perhaps even a weapon being polished in the dark, if Slytherin can claim his loyalty while the other houses squabble over his schedule. Draco does not retreat when Harry fails to snub Ron. Instead, he recalibrates. Every week Harry sleeps in the dungeons. Draco intensifies his charm offensive, drawing maps of influence, explaining which professors matter, which prefects can be bent. Possessiveness grows in the shadowed arches. Harry's presence is a prize he intends to win. As the rotations begin, the emotional geometry distorts. Ron's easy camaraderie corrodes on the nights. Harry vanishes behind the wall of green and silver, replaced by a quiet resentment that his best friend is sharing secrets with the enemy. Hermione all but glows when Harry moves through Ravenclaw Tower, treating his temporary residency as a controlled experiment, proof that intellect might yet anchor his identity. The Hufflepuff dormitories, by contrast, become his only unclaimed ground. Soft chairs, warm fires, and companions who do not ask what he will be used for, only whether he is eaten. The core question hardens with each rotation. If houses define family, what happens to a boy who is ritually uprooted 4 times a month? The Golden Trio does not coalesce with the same effortless inevitability. Instead, it becomes a negotiation between insecurity, curiosity, and ambition, with Harry at the center as contested territory rather than chosen brother. By Christmas, Hogwarts has accepted the logistics of Harry's divided life, but the emotional war is only beginning. The next rupture will not come from a Dark Lord, but from a 12-year-old's choice of where to sit when the owl post arrives, and who he allows to read his letters first. Year 1, replayed. The Philosopher's Stone in a house war. That choice at breakfast is not trivial. In this timeline, it becomes a live referendum on which house currently owns the boy who lived's attention, and, by extension, his future power. The Great Hall tracks his steps with the same methodical certainty it once reserved for Quidditch scores and house cups. From that point, Harry's rotating schedule stops being a curiosity and crystallizes into an information engine. Nights in Gryffindor mean whispered boasts and half-baked dares about the forbidden third-floor corridor, all framed as an adventure waiting to happen. Evenings in Slytherin, the same corridor is passed as a security flaw in Hogwarts' ancient fortress architecture. Students speculate in low voices about what Dumbledore would guard so publicly, and who might already be probing the wards. In Ravenclaw, it becomes an academic riddle tied to Philomel, alchemy, and the ethics of immortality. Hufflepuff turns it into rumor about a dangerous creature with anxious logistics, about evacuation routes, and first years. No single house ever assembles the full pattern. Harry does. The trio, therefore, never coheres as a neat Gryffindor unit. They are a shifting coalition built on access and timing. Some weeks it is canon adjacent, Ron and Hermione flanking him, sneaking to the library, arguing over whether the stone even exists. On others, the investigation runs through the dungeons, Draco, 2 wary Slytherin escorts, and Harry walking the castle at curfew under the pretense of protecting house interests, mapping patrol patterns with tactically lethal precision. On quieter nights, a Hufflepuff friend from herbology covers for him in the kitchens, trading pastries and gossip for small, careful truths. The result is a network, not a friendship trio, a masterpiece to be molded, but not yet consciously by Harry himself. Quirrell feels this before he understands it. The parasitic mind sharing his skull expects a Gryffindor hero with a built-in support structure and predictable loyalties. They are wrong. What returns his stutter to genuine fear is the realization that no head of house can be leaned on to control Harry. No dormitory can be watched to guarantee his location. The boy is simultaneously overexposed and unclaimed. That makes him harder to anticipate and, paradoxically, easier to isolate. If something happens to Harry between towers and dungeons, which house will truly move first, and which will simply argue jurisdiction while the corridor fills with echoes? Key set pieces fracture under this pressure. The midnight duel is no longer a simple Gryffindor-Slytherin grudge. It is a public relations disaster. Every misstep is framed as which house's influence led him astray. The troll incident becomes a referendum on whether divided loyalty endangers everyone else. McGonagall sees reckless courage. Snape sees Slytherin opportunism misapplied. Sprout sees a frightened child pulled between expectations. Even the mirror of Erised shifts. Harry is not merely a boy seeing his parents, but a symbol being watched in silence by staff who wonder which house's ghost he is reaching for. Dumbledore's protections around the stone respond to this altered resonance. The gauntlet is no longer a linear test of Gryffindor courage. It quietly demands Hufflepuff endurance, Ravenclaw insight, Slytherin calculation, and, only then, raw bravery. Each chamber asks whether Harry can integrate what he has absorbed from 4 competing cultures into a coherent soul resonance, rather than a fractured identity. The stone survives, not because he is purely brave, but because he is dangerously undecidable. The war has already begun to bend around that fact. The only question is, which house understands it first? Chamber of Echoes, a diary, a serpent, and a divided hero. The war bends again when the whispers begin. When Harry speaks Parseltongue in the dueling club, the Great Hall does not pivot in unison to glare at the Slytherin table. In this timeline, there is no simple vector for fear. Every table has a claim on him. Every table has an alibi. Gryffindors mutter that bravery can speak any language it needs to. Ravenclaws argue that linguistic anomalies are merely data. Hufflepuffs insist they would have noticed if he were dangerous. Slytherins, for once, are not the only suspects. They are wrong. What emerges is not solidarity, but a four-way blame game conducted in whispers and glances, each house projecting its darkest anxieties onto the boy who belongs to none of them. If Harry is a serpent speaker, then perhaps that proves he was secretly Slytherin all along. Or perhaps, more unnervingly, it proves that the boundaries between houses are not protections at all, but illusions. The castle feels less like a school and more like a fortress, with hairline cracks running through every wall. The Founder's trial, which was once a spectacle, becomes his only real defense. Its rotating demands grant him sanctioned access to law that no second year should touch. Ravenclaw's tower opens its archives on Hogwarts founding disputes and early infrastructure, including half-legible notes about subterranean redundancies under the school. Hufflepuff prefects, proud that he keeps passing their trials, share oral histories about Helga's insistence that no child be left out of the protections woven into the stones. In Slytherin's damp corridors, older students, half terrified and half fascinated, drop hints about Salazar's private corrections to the castle's layout, corrections that never made it into official maps. Gryffindor, still trying to claim him through narrative if not by bed, feeds him tales of past monsters slain in these halls by those who simply refused to run. It is an accidental education in total house consciousness, a masterpiece to be moulded not by any one tradition, but by their collision. Harry becomes a walking archive of contradictory founding myths, a weapon being polished in the dark by four competing sharpening stones. Tom Riddle's diary notices, in the quiet of an unused classroom, the ink memory that once sought a lonely, impressionable girl now encounters a boy whose identity is already a contested battlefield. Riddle recognizes the familiar notes at once: the Slytherin potential, the outsider status, the sense of watching the school from the edges. But he also perceives something that did not exist in his own youth, a soul resonance that hums across all four houses, thin but real, giving Harry social and informational reach that Riddle never possessed. In this timeline, the diary does not simply manipulate, it interrogates. Riddle asks about the trial, about how it feels to be judged, dissected, paraded between crests. He frames the chamber not as a horror, but as an inheritance project, interrupted, implying that only someone as undecided as Harry could truly finish Salazar's work, whatever finishing might mean. When the chamber finally opens, the confrontation below the school is less a duel and more an exam written by four ghosts. Harry descends with Gryffindor's raw courage, refusing to abandon Ginny or the school that has never fully claimed him. He survives by Slytherin cunning, using the basilisk's own lethal gaze through the mirrored surface of a fallen shield, turning its power back on itself with methodical certainty. He untangles Riddle's half-truths with Ravenclaw insight, recognizing that the diary is not a boy, but a parasitic fragment of will. And he stays, bleeding and stubborn, because Hufflepuff loyalty will not let him leave any child, Weasley or otherwise, on a cold stone floor. Riddle loses the battle, but he learns the lesson. As the diary dissolves, the echo of Tom Marvolo Riddle understands that if he cannot drag Harry fully into Slytherin, he can do something far more devastating. He can turn Harry's divided identity into a wedge, a narrative weapon aimed at Hogwarts itself. The Slytherin timeline will not be about converting the boy who lived. It will be about making the castle choose a side or break. A weapon with no banner. Voldemort's new strategy for the houseless boy. Voldemort hears the rumor before he ever meets the boy. Potter is houseless, not a hat stall, not a charming anecdote for the staff table, but a failure of the Founder's last great artifact. The Sorting Hat, in this timeline, did not hesitate. It refused. It named Harry unsorted in front of the whole school, and the echo of that word travels farther than any owl post. Information reaches Voldemort in fragments, then in patterns. First, through Quirrell's stammered reports, a boy who moves between common rooms as if the house wards are suggestions, who studies with Ravenclaws, spars with Gryffindors, and walks the dungeons under Snape's nominal protection. Then, through the diary, Tom Riddle's preserved arrogance colliding with a mind that does not fit into any of the boxes Hogwarts provides. The soul resonance is wrong. The boy thinks like a Slytherin, bleeds like a Gryffindor, learns like a Ravenclaw, and shields the broken the way a Hufflepuff should. He is, to Riddle's horror, a masterpiece to be moulded by no one. By the time the diary is destroyed, the pattern is confirmed by a quieter network, the children of Death Eaters, writing home about the unmoored boy who can sit at any table and at none. They call him a weapon without a banner. Voldemort understands the strategic implication before anyone else. The world believes that house loyalty defines the battlefield. They are wrong. This is the man who, even as a child in the orphanage, rejected belonging as weakness. He used Slytherin as a ladder, not a home, and discarded the banner the moment it stopped adding power. Now he looks across the war at a child who might do the same thing, but with the entire school. A houseless Harry can walk through the old rivalries like a ghost, uniting them behind a single myth or shattering them into permanent fracture. Either outcome threatens Voldemort's authority. Either outcome rewrites the Slytherin timeline. So the tactics change. The crude solution, kill the boy, is temporarily shelved in favor of experiment. Voldemort begins to design crises with methodical certainty, each one a test of alignment. A troll driven not toward Gryffindor Tower, but released at the junction of all four house corridors, forcing Harry to decide whom to save first. A cursed artifact placed in a Hufflepuff's hands, but traced back to a Slytherin patron, daring Harry to assign blame. Notes, delivered through frightened intermediaries, offering secret knowledge only if you will meet under a specific house banner. Every choice is engineered to alienate someone. If Harry sides with Slytherin pragmatism, Gryffindor howls betrayal. If he performs Gryffindor heroics, Slytherin whispers, Dumbledore's pawn. If he leans into Ravenclaw analysis or Hufflepuff solidarity, the others feel abandoned. The castle becomes a fortress of mirrors, and Voldemort watches which reflections Harry breaks. In the darker corners of prophecy, a new title begins to circulate among those who study timelines and war. Not the chosen one, but the unmoored, a figure foretold in half-legible scrawl as the child who will either dissolve the old orders or be devoured by them, whose power lies not in a scar, but in the refusal of any banner to claim him fully. The next confrontation will not open with green light. It will begin in a chamber where Harry must reach for magic shaped by house identity, lion's courage, serpent's cunning, eagle's clarity, badger's endurance, and decide which current to ride. The real question is simple and terrifying. What happens if, at the critical moment, he chooses none? Year by year, how an undecided Harry rewrites the Hogwarts timeline. Year 3 begins with that non-choice calcifying into daily architecture. Harry's houseless status, once a procedural embarrassment, has become a corridor pass, a social solvent, and a surveillance network in human form. In this timeline, the Marauder's map is not a secret contraband. It is an instrument handed to the only student who can plausibly enter every common room without triggering a political incident. With Lupin on staff and Sirius's name still blackened, Harry's cross-house drift pulls old ghosts into the open. He hears Slytherins mutter about Snape's schoolyard humiliations. Ravenclaws dissect the ethics of memory charms. Hufflepuffs catalogue every unpunished bullying case. Gryffindors whisper about James's pranks with a pride that curdles into doubt. The revelation that the Marauder's brilliance coexisted with cruelty does not stay in private conversations. It becomes a public seminar on institutional hypocrisy. Dumbledore's curated silence fractures as Lupin, cornered by a houseless boy who knows too much, admits how far the staff once looked away. The past stops being legend and becomes evidence. By year 4, that evidence walks into the Great Hall wearing dress robes and foreign colours. The Triwizard Tournament, designed as spectacle and diplomacy, mutates into a referendum on what Harry is. Gryffindors insist his defiance of the hat proves he is theirs in spirit. Slytherins claim his strategic neutrality as quintessentially serpentine. Ravenclaws call him a living thesis against binary categorization. Hufflepuffs argue that his refusal to abandon any house shows their endurance. They are all reaching for the same weapon. They are wrong. Beauxbatons and Durmstrang see something else. A school so bound to medieval partitions that it had to invent a founder's trial to process one anomaly. Their champions treat Harry less as rival and more as case study in systemic failure. Every task becomes a test not only of courage or cunning, but of whether house identity still has any coherent authority. The Yule Ball, in this atmosphere, is not a dance. It is a diplomatic summit where partners are chosen across house lines as deliberate statements, and where Harry's choice of companion is passed like a treaty. Year 5 converts that symbolism into open resistance. When Umbridge arrives, she does not face a Gryffindor insurgency tucked into a room of requirement. She collides with a cross-house network only Harry can convene. Dumbledore's army is less a club than a proto-parliament, its membership chart mapping the entire castle. A houseless leader teaching shield charms to Slytherins and hex theory to Hufflepuffs is, to the Ministry, more dangerous than any single dark artifact. Under the pink lace and poisoned smiles, this is war doctrine being written by teenagers. A pattern interrupt lands here. The Ministry assumes that decapitating Gryffindor will pacify Hogwarts. There is no Gryffindor head to cut off. There is only Harry, a weapon being polished in the dark centre of the school, answering to no house banner at all. By year 6, that centre of gravity begins distorting adult strategies. Slughorn's Slug Club, engineered to harvest influence, cannot simply skim Gryffindor and Slytherin anymore. It orbits Harry, who arrives to meetings with Hufflepuff loyalty, Ravenclaw data, and Slytherin rumors braided into a single unnerving brief. Snape's new authority as defense professor runs into the same problem. The student he must both protect and manipulate is the one person who can move, unquestioned, between his old house and its historic enemies. This mobility accelerates the Horcrux hunt. Conversations that, in the original timeline, would be siloed, gaunt ancestry in Slytherin, diadem legends in Ravenclaw, cup lore in Hufflepuff, now converge around one boy with an almost unnatural soul resonance for patterns. Harry traces the outline of Voldemort's immortality with methodical certainty years earlier, not because he is more powerful, but because the castle itself has become his archive. Power notices, so do predators, Death Eaters, watching from the shadows of ministry ballrooms and nocturne back rooms, begin to imagine what it would mean to recruit the only wizard raised inside all four cultures at once. The ministry, already burned by Umbridge's failure, files Harry as both asset and existential risk. Every owl from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement reads like a veiled threat. And still, the Founders' Trial renews each September with bureaucratic efficiency. What was meant as a temporary accommodation has ossified into constitutional revision. First years arrive, having heard legends not of Godric's sword or Salazar's basilisk, but of the boy with no crest who rewrote how the castle breathes. The houses remain, banners still hanging, passwords still changing. But the true axis of Hogwarts is no longer lion versus serpent. It is proximity to Harry Potter. By the end of 6th year, the question within every staff meeting and whispered corridor pact is no longer, where will we put him? It is, when the final war summons comes, which way will the center fall? The Slytherin timeline imagined a single house forging a sovereign. Here, the entire school has been complicit in crafting a masterpiece to be molded by the coming fire. The hat's crisis of faith, when an artifact starts to doubt its makers. But there is one witness to this slow convergence that does not sit in staff meetings and cannot pace a corridor. It hangs in the headmaster's office, and once a term, by ancient compact, it is placed again upon Harry Potter's head. In this timeline, the Founders' Trial is not ceremonial language, but binding protocol. Any student the hat cannot assign in the first sitting must be reassessed at regular intervals until a final alignment is achieved, or the student leaves Hogwarts. On paper, it is a safeguard against error. In practice, with Harry, it becomes a recurring crisis of faith for an artifact that has not doubted its makers in 1,000 years. Each term, the hat lowers, the brim closes over green eyes, and silence falls like a ward. The first reassessment at the end of first year is almost reassuring. The hat finds the same volatile admixture: Gryffindor nerve, Slytherin cunning, Ravenclaw abstraction, Hufflepuff endurance, yet already more integrated, the edges bleeding into one another like inks in water. By 3rd year, that blend has hardened into methodical certainty. Harry no longer oscillates between houses. He raids them, selecting traits as if they were weapons laid out on a table. The hat was designed to read potential along 4 axes. With Harry, it keeps stumbling over a 5th: choice. It tastes it in his thoughts like iron on the tongue, Not the childish wish to be brave or clever, but a cold, self-authored directive. I will be what the war requires. Here, the Slytherin timeline offers a cautionary echo. There, Harry was a weapon being polished in the dark by Bellatrix. Here, he is polishing himself. The hat, constructed to channel souls into pre-cut grooves, finds itself staring at a soul resonance that keeps rewriting its own parameters. Its songs about founders begin to sound, even to its stitched ears, like propaganda. So it adapts, quietly, treacherously. By fourth year, the hat is no longer trying to sort Harry, it is advising him. In the compressed minutes of contact, it mutters warnings about house extremes, the Gryffindor tendency to mistake recklessness for virtue, Slytherin's slide from ambition into pure dominion, Ravenclaw's worship of abstraction, Hufflepuff's capacity to endure even chains. It hints at forgotten lore, Rowena's abandoned theory of a unified curriculum, Helga's proposal for a fifth banner that was never woven, Salazar's private fear that houses would one day become fortresses against change rather than engines of it. Harry listens. He files it away like intelligence. Hogwarts itself begins to notice. Wards that once flexed only for heads of house, now thin for Harry's touch. Staircases that historically favoured house traffic patterns seem to bend toward his roots. Certain artifacts, ancestral portraits, classroom relics respond less to crests on robes and more to his direct command, as if the institution is re-indexing authority away from colour and toward will. They are wrong, those who say Hogwarts only obeys its founders. The castle has always been watching for an heir to its deeper design. In their final private sitting before the war breaks fully open, the hat does something it has never done. It confesses there is. It tells Harry one last protocol buried beneath its seams, etched into the magic by the founders and then struck from every song, a way to bypass the houses altogether and awaken a different legacy, a convergent charter that would treat Hogwarts not as four competing tribes, but as a single armed mind. To invoke it would be to break 1,000 years of habit and rearm the school for a new kind of war. The hat cannot activate it. Harry must choose. And if he does, it warns: no house, no headmaster, no ministry decree will be able to contain what steps out of those walls next. The final year, choosing a house or destroying the system. War does not wait for exams to finish. In this timeline, it arrives at Hogwarts early, not as a dramatic siege in 7th year, but as a slow, grinding occupation that seeps into corridors and common rooms until every conversation is a skirmish and every friendship a potential act of treason. The castle becomes a fortress, in fact, not metaphor. Snatchers and masked security consultants appear on staff rosters. The Carrows are given formal authority over discipline. House points are quietly replaced by collective punishments. Death Eaters do not merely tolerate house rivalries, they weaponize them, turning old jokes about lions and snakes into surveillance networks and supply chains for cruelty. Gryffindors are baited into open defiance so they can be publicly broken. Slytherins are offered power in exchange for information. Ravenclaws are seduced with restricted libraries and research exemptions. Hufflepuffs are told, very gently, that neutrality is safety. They are wrong. Underneath, the school shudders towards civil war. The only counterweight is Harry himself, the boy claimed by all four colours and owned by none. There is a Hufflepuff logistics circle that will smuggle food to punished Gryffindors because Harry asked once, quietly. A Ravenclaw codebook that routes messages through enchanted homework. A Slytherin dueling cadre that accidentally misfires hexes past Muggleborns so they have time to run. His cross-house web is the last thread holding Hogwarts together, a masterpiece of improvised resistance constructed by a weapon being polished in the dark. It is into this pressure cooker that the hat finally breaks its own silence. In the headmaster's office, while the walls shake with distant curses, it reveals the protocol even Dumbledore never suspected, an ancient enchantment keyed to soul resonance and existential peril, allowing one witch or wizard per age to claim the undiluted legacy of a single founder. Not a sorting, a coronation. The cost is brutal in its simplicity. Invoke it, and your identity, your magic, your public self fuse permanently with one house. No transfers, no second chances. No more being everyone's and no one's. The options crystallize with methodical certainty. Gryffindor would give him courage refined to an almost suicidal purity, the power to stand alone in the courtyard and draw all fire to be the banner and the shield simultaneously. Slytherin would sharpen his already tactically lethal mind into something serpentine and absolute, granting him the capacity to outflank Voldemort, not just in battle, but in myth, to steal the Dark Lord's own followers through colder charisma. Ravenclaw offers a different weapon, piercing, inhuman clarity, the ability to read the runic architecture of Horcrux magic at a glance, to unweave immortality as if it were a miscast charm. Hufflepuff, so often dismissed, promises the most subversive power of all, the unbreakable unity to weld the houses into a single will, to make Hogwarts itself rise as one organism against invasion. For Harry, the psychology is the battlefield. Years of being the Slytherin timeline's anomaly, lion-hearted in green, eagle-eyed among badgers, loyal to no crest on his robes, have taught him to live as a composite, a moving convergence charter in human form. To choose now is not an abstract exercise in values. It feels like killing 3 living futures, 3 houses that have bled for him, 3 communities that saw in him a masterpiece to be moulded in their own image. On the night the wards finally scream, and Voldemort's army masses at the gates, Harry stands in the shattered Great Hall, the sorting hat warm and impossibly heavy in his hands. Around him, banners burn, colours blur in the smoke, and every eye waits to see which symbol he will save. For the first time, the boy who was never chosen must choose himself, house or no house at all. The 5th path, Harry's refusal and the birth of a new Hogwarts. Harry does not lift the hat. In the ringing, smoke-thick silence of the ruined hall, with the war pressing at the walls like a storm tide, he does something far worse, for the old order at least. He sets the sorting hat gently on the broken flagstones, as if returning a relic to its altar, and straightens with the unsteady grace of someone who has finally stepped out of a role written for him by dead people. "I'm not yours," he says, not to Gryffindor or Slytherin or any cheering phantom founder, but to the castle itself. The words carry with methodical certainty, amplified by the wards that have watched him grow. I'm not a fragment of you, any of you. I am what happens when you all fail to fit, and the world keeps going anyway. In this timeline, that is an act of treason against 1,000 years of architecture. The response is immediate and tectonic. House banners that had flared like battle standards a moment before shudder, then dim, their colours bleeding at the edges as if someone has poured water through the weave. Red runs into green, blue collapses into yellow, until the four standards hang as a single shifting spectrum, no crest able to hold its boundaries. Above them, invisible but suddenly audible, the castle's ancient lattice of protections twists. Wards that once braided themselves around 4 common rooms and 4 dormitory staircases rethread, lines of force snapping inward until the anchor point is not a house, not a founder, but Harry himself. They are wrong, those who thought the founders were the highest authority Hogwarts could express. The hat was a weapon being polished in the dark. The houses, a masterpiece to be moulded and remoulded into obedience. Under that scaffolding, the school has been quietly collecting something else, the residue of every student who never truly fit their colours, every hat stall that almost broke the system, every quiet act of disloyalty to a mascot in favour of a friend. Harry steps into that soul resonance, and it steps into him. What unlocks is not Gryffindor's roar or Slytherin's hiss, not Ravenclaw's cold clarity or Hufflepuff's patient hum, but the composite pressure of generations. Loyalty from kitchens and greenhouses, curiosity from forgotten towers, ambition from the dungeons, courage from every corridor where someone stood up and no one wrote it down. The fortress itself leans closer, recognizing not a house champion, but a human fulcrum. So when Voldemort strides through the shattered doors, his power is calibrated for the old game. He has come prepared to corrupt a lion, outwit an eagle, trample a badger, break a snake. He finds instead a boy who is none of these, and all of them, surrounded by students who have abandoned their tables to stand in a single ragged line. Spells behave differently in that alignment. Shield charms thicken when cast shoulder to shoulder by former rivals. A Slytherin's serpentine curse, braided with a Hufflepuff's protective instinct, becomes tactically lethal in ways no textbook anticipates. Memories cross-pollinate in the clash. Hermione's first library all-nighter reinforcing a Ravenclaw's focus. A Weasley prank lending volatile force to a Ravenclaw equation. A Slytherin's buried guilt fueling a Gryffindor's refusal to fall. Protections trigger not because a crest is threatened, but because Hogwarts itself registers harm to those who have claimed it without condition. Staircases lock under Death Eater feet. Suits of armour move with coordinated precision, not to defend a house banner, but to hold a line around the students clustered closest to Harry. The duel at the centre is almost quiet. When their final spells meet, it is not Lily's love alone that turns the killing curse. It is the aggregated will of a school that has finally chosen itself over its founders. Voldemort dies in a burst of uncoloured light, stripped even of Slytherin's emblem, as the magic that once anchored him refuses to recognise his claim. Afterwards, the silence is worse than the screaming. The banners do not separate again. The hat, will never sort another child with the old confidence. In the uneasy dawn, as survivors pick through rubble in robes that no longer match any clear allegiance, one fact settles over them like dust. The boy who couldn't be sorted has cracked the houses. War is over. The argument about whether the world still needs the Founders' boxes is only beginning. Aftermath. A school without walls and a boy without a label. In the weeks after the battle, Hogwarts becomes a laboratory, not of potions or charms, but of identity. The first decree is deceptively simple. The house cup is suspended until further notice. The hourglasses in the Great Hall freeze mid-glitter, rubies and emeralds and sapphires hanging like crystallized arguments. And with that gesture, the ancient metric of worth, points won, points lost, loses its legal authority. From there, reform accelerates with methodical certainty. Certain evenings, the common rooms are unsealed. The fat lady swings open for Slytherins. The serpent door admits Hufflepuffs, and Ravenclaws find themselves sharing riddles with Gryffindors by the dying fire. Cross-house mentorship, once a quiet rebellion practiced by a few professors, is written into the timetable. Slytherin 7th year's tutoring, Hufflepuff first years in defensive wards, Ravenclaws supervising Gryffindor research in the library's dark stacks. And at the core of this new architecture, the Founders' trial, Harry's impossible public refusal to be sorted, is codified in ink and magic as a permanent clause. Any child may stand before the hat and invoke it. They are wrong, the pureblood columnists write, to call this progress. In this timeline, resistance gathers not in dungeons, but in drawing rooms. Traditionalists mutter about diluted banners and house impurity. Some alumni stalk the reopened corridors like ghosts, staring at mixed study groups as if watching their own pasts be quietly edited. Even the portraits of the Founders fracture. Godric and Salazar argue in low, furious tones over whether this experiment represents their ultimate failure or their hidden success, while Helga and Rowena watch with the weary patience of those who always knew their masterpiece would outgrow them. Harry moves through this shifting fortress with the silence of someone who has won a war and lost the script of what comes next. The world insists on naming him Gryffindor hero in memorial speeches, Slytherin strategist in whispered ministry briefings, Ravenclaw prodigy when he dismantles cursed legislation, Hufflepuff heart when he is seen, once, repairing a shattered memorial stone by hand. Each title lands on him like another house scarf thrown over shoulders that never wanted a single colour. He was a weapon being polished in the dark by prophecy and expectation. Now, stripped of the sorting's verdict, he is forced to confront the possibility that there is no single soul resonance to hide behind, just Harry, exposed. Around him, relationships warp and clarify. Ron Weasley, who once treated the Gryffindor table as a birthright, finds himself mentoring a nervous Slytherin second year and realizing how many friendships he never allowed to exist. Hermione, who once trusted systems by default, becomes their sharpest critic, dissecting how house lines shaped every alliance she ever made. Draco, raised on the Slytherin timeline's mythology of purity, is left staring at a house that no longer guarantees power, only responsibility. His grudges against Harry decay into something stranger, and more honest when they study together under a Hufflepuff prefect's supervision. The question, eventually, turns outward. If you had walked these corridors where banners are suggestions and not cages, would you still have let a hat define you at 11? Or would you, like Harry, have demanded the right to decide who you are on your own timeline? Canon in the Shattered Mirror. What this changes about Harry's story. Canon, by contrast, feels suddenly narrow, almost provincial. In the original books, the sorting is a moment of anxiety resolved by affirmation. Here, the sorting is a public system's failure, and the rest of Harry's life is the world scrambling to patch the breach. Structurally, everything fractures from that first refusal. The hat does not merely hesitate, it breaks pattern, declaring Harry an undecidable anomaly and triggering the Founder's trial. An ancient arbitration ritual no one has seen outside dusty marginalia. Lessons are rescheduled around hearings in the Great Hall. House tables become negotiation platforms. The castle, once a comforting fortress of routine, reorients itself around one boy who belongs to all four banners and none. In this timeline, cross-house friendships are not rebellious exceptions. They are the only way to survive the political weather Harry drags in his wake. War, therefore, arrives early and arrives talking. Instead of a quiet first year ending in a secret duel beneath the school, the conflict escalates in committee rooms, Wizengamot sessions, and whispered strategy meetings above the kitchens. Voldemort's proxies test wards and alliances long before his body returns, and the final battle, when it comes, is fought as much over who has the authority to define a soul as it is over who controls death. Wands clash over ideology. Banners burn as signals, not trophies. Harry's arc bends accordingly. Canonical Harry is the reluctant Gryffindor hero who spends 7 years learning to accept that the role chosen for him, Seeker, Chosen One, Sacrificial Lamb, might also be the role he would choose for himself. This Harry is denied that comfort, named houseless, weaponized as precedent. He learns instead to define his own role against every system that tries to claim him. The hat that wants balance, the ministry that wants a symbol, Dumbledore who wants a narrative, Voldemort who wants a Horcruxed masterpiece to be moulded. Each demand sharpens him. Each label he refuses is a weapon being polished in the dark. The adults cannot remain static around him. Dumbledore, who in canon choreographs events with almost theatrical precision, is forced to relinquish narrative control when the Founder's magic overrides even his methodical certainty. He becomes, uncomfortably, a participant rather than a director. McGonagall, whose identity is braided into Gryffindor's red and gold, must confront the possibility that house loyalty is an emotional convenience, not a moral compass. As she watches her favorite student thrive in study circles that ignore her tower entirely, Snape, perhaps, is hit hardest, tasked by circumstance and oath to protect a boy who carries Lily's curiosity, James's defiance, and Slytherin's strategic patience in a single, unnerving soul resonance. Voldemort's fall, in turn, is recast. It is still love over death, but also self-chosen identity over inherited labels and ancient sorting mechanisms. The prophecy is fulfilled, not when Harry kills him, but when Harry refuses to be the vessel. House, Horcrux, or Hallows that Voldemort expects. The Slytherin timeline believed categories would hold. They are wrong, and that is the core answer to this what if. If Harry were the first student the hat could not decide, the wizarding world would be forced to face the question it buried under a millennium of tradition. Are houses a tradition, or a cage? And what happens to a world built on cages when one boy walks out? Your house, your Harry, inviting you into the alternate timeline. So now the question passes from the hat to you. If Hogwarts itself cannot decide what Harry Potter is in this timeline, who do you believe he becomes when the doors of the Great Hall close and the war begins to breathe again? Do you anchor him, despite everything, in Gryffindor, arguing that the boy who walked into the Forbidden Forest in canon still exists beneath the alpine polish, still capable of self-sacrifice over methodical certainty? Then show it. Go back to the Triwizard Maze in the Slytherin timeline and tell us how a red and gold Harry faces a tactically lethal Cedric, a living riddle, and a resurrected Dark Lord. Does he still turn the cup into a shared victory, or does courage, refracted through this darker education, mean choosing who lives and who is left behind? Or do you claim him for Slytherin without apology, insisting that a weapon being polished in the dark belongs in the dungeons by right of soul resonance and design? If so, walk us through Dumbledore's army under green banners. Hermione as his chief strategist, Draco as rival or subordinate, Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws negotiating with a house that has become a fortress of cold authority rather than a nest of petty bullies. Which alliances fracture, which survive, and who dares to refuse when Harry offers protection in exchange for obedience? Perhaps you see a Ravenclaw Harry instead, a masterpiece to be moulded by questions rather than commands, treating prophecy, Horcruxes, and house identity as a logic puzzle to be dismantled. In that case, pick a year, the Chamber of Secrets, the Half-Blood Prince, the final battle, and rewire it through blue and bronze. Or you might argue for Hufflepuff, the quiet heresy, loyalty as weapon, justice as organizing principle, the boy who lived, turning the entire school into a union against both Dark Lord and Headmaster. If you believe that, map the revolt. Do not just name a house. Build a case. Use Pottermore lore, found a history, Wandwoods, the psychology of a child, trained as a weapon, yet starving for genuine attachment. Tell us where you think the hat misread him, or where we did. If you think they are wrong, prove it in the comments. And if your mind runs further down the corridor of what-ifs, choose the next door we open. Do we follow a Draco who becomes the second student the hat cannot place, forced to choose between Harry's gravitational pull and his father's expectations? Do we trace a Voldemort who, in a moment of warped genius, tries to abolish the houses entirely before the war, collapsing the very categories that made him possible? In the end, the Sorting Hat is not just a relic, it is a mechanism of war disguised as a song. As long as it lowers onto another child's head, as long as it hums its verdict into the silence of the hall, the question will remain unanswered. Who might you have been in another house, or in none at all? Answer it below. Because somewhere, in some timeline, the hat hesitates again, and this time, it has learned from Harry Potter.